Welcome back to part 2 of the Montauk Project podcast. We continue our journey through Nicholas Preston's extraordinary discoveries, focusing on the events surrounding Fort Hero and the mysterious experiments conducted by the U.S. government. Today, we take a closer look at Wilhelm Reich, his discoveries, and the role they played in weather control research. A scientist compared to Nikola Tesla, Wilhelm Reich is famous for his research on the so-called Orgone energy. This was a type of energy that Reich discovered and defined as a life force that could be used to treat diseases, including cancer, and to affect the world around us. Interestingly, Reich had previously collaborated with the founders of modern psychology, Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud. However, his research was not limited to psychology and Orgone energy. He also discovered the existence of an opposing force, which he called DOR energy. This destructive energy had the ability to neutralize the positive effects of orgone. You're listening to Talesphony podcast, your weekly dose of tales. In the 1940s and early 1950s, Reich became a subject of interest to the U.S. government, mainly because of his research into weather control. Weather was of great importance to military operations, especially during strategic operations. Controlling it could provide a tactical advantage on the battlefield. At the time, the U.S. government was conducting weather experiments using radiosondes, weather balloons equipped with sensors to measure temperature, humidity, and atmospheric pressure. Radiosondes had been in use since the 1920s, but their accuracy initially left much to be desired, as it was not always possible to recover the devices after they landed. This prompted researchers to equip the balloons with radio transmitters that would send data to weather centers in real time. Although Reich was aware of these technological advances, he was interested in something completely different. He had discovered that weather could be manipulated using specific energy waves. Imagine a storm approaching. Reich claimed he could increase its intensity or weaken it enough to cease posing a threat. His weather research was so promising that the American government began to support his work. In the next stages of his experiments, Reich not only proved the existence of orgone energy, but also began to manipulate atmospheric phenomena. He discovered that he could influence the weather by changing the structure of storms or weather fronts using energy waves, which aroused great interest in the military. Reich's research on weather and orgone energy began to intertwine with experiments conducted at Fort Hero, where secret projects based on controlling not only atmospheric phenomena, but also time were developed. This really caught the attention of the American government. It is worth emphasizing that it was no longer just about the ability to increase or decrease the intensity of a single storm or tornado. The key was the ability to fully control the weather, even order specific atmospheric conditions at any time and place. Wilhelm Reich constructed a device that, he claimed, enabled just such manipulation. Reich presented his device in the form of a test before high-ranking Pentagon officers and scientists. The device consisted of two main components, a thermometer and a hygrometer. To the average observer, they may have looked like ordinary meteorological instruments, but in reality, they acted as antennas that responded to two key energies, positive orgone energy and negative DOR energy. This allowed monitoring the intensity of these energies in the atmosphere. A small generator was mounted under the weather balloon, which could be remotely activated using a radio pulse or an automatic mechanism. When the balloon was in an area where a higher concentration of orgone or DOR energy was detected, the generator sent a pulse at a frequency of 403 megahertz. Depending on the phase of the radio wave, this could either neutralize an atmospheric phenomenon, such as a storm, or amplify it. Imagine that in this case, the radio pulse acted as a second wave that superimposed itself on top of the already existing atmospheric waves. If the phases of the two waves were identical, they could cancel each other out, leading to the disintegration of a storm or even a tornado. On the other hand, if the pulse was slightly out of phase, it could amplify the natural phenomenon, increasing its strength, much like waves in water, which under the right conditions can build a larger wave. It was this ability to manipulate weather that made such an impression on the military. Reich repeated his experiments over and over again, achieving similar results each time, astonishing observers. However, over time, serious concerns arose. It became obvious that the public and potential adversaries could not learn of the existence of such technology, because it could cause chaos, especially if someone found one of these devices after it landed. The problem was that at that time, thousands of weather balloons, including radiosondes based on Reich's technology, were regularly flying over the United States. There were too many opportunities for such a device to be found by a random person, which could arouse suspicion. Therefore, to reduce the risk of discovery, additional security measures were put in place. The electron tubes that were in the balloons had special labels informing them that after a few hours they would stop working, although in reality they were fully functional for much longer. Ultimately, however, the government came to the conclusion that the project posed too much risk. For example, if a tornado created by such technology destroyed a farm or other property, the owners could sue the government. Fears of mass lawsuits forced Congress to publicly end the program. Officially, the project was terminated, but in reality, certain forces that saw the potential of this technology did not intend to give it up. At this point, against the background of thoughts about weather manipulation and electromagnetic possibilities, another mysterious project was remembered. The experiments at Montauk gained momentum under John von Neumann, and interest in Project Rainbow and Project Phoenix grew among the highest echelons of the military. Neumann, a veteran scientist who had worked on the Manhattan Project and the early design of vacuum tube computers, he was once again called upon to unravel the mysteries surrounding the phenomena that had occurred during the Philadelphia experiment. He was also tasked with investigating potential connections between Project Rainbow and Wilhelm Reich's work on orgone energy. Wilhelm Reich, famous for his research on orgone, a mysterious energy that he described as the life force that permeates the universe, became a key figure in the new experiments at Montauk. Reich believed that orgone could affect not only human health but also the weather and even electromagnetic phenomena. Combining Reich's theories with the electromagnetic wave technology and teleportation work already underway at Project Rainbow offered the potential for a powerful technology that, if used militarily, could give the United States an advantage over any adversary. The experiments at Montauk included work on various aspects of space-time physics, manipulation of electromagnetism, and attempts to influence weather conditions. Among other things, the SAGE radar was used for this purpose, which operated at a frequency of around 425 MHz, exactly the frequency needed for more precise experiments related to electromagnetic waves. The Montauk base on Long Island was an excellent location for such activities. It was isolated, surrounded by water, and easy to secure, which minimized the risk of curious observers. One of the more dramatic moments associated with the Rainbow Project was the previously mentioned disappearance of the USS Eldridge during the Philadelphia experiment. At that time, due to unforeseen complications, the ship was transported to another dimension for several hours, and when it returned, part of the crew was literally melted into its structure. This incident caused panic, but at the same time, interest in the possibilities that could result from controlling such phenomena. Although the project was officially declared a failure, scientists including von Neumann saw some success in it, especially in terms of evidence of previously unknown properties of spacetime. Later, in the 1950s and 1960s, Project Rainbow was merged with Project Phoenix, which focused primarily on energy manipulation and mind altering using electromagnetic waves. Much of this research was based on the ether theory, which was supported by scientists such as Nikola Tesla and Albert Einstein. The ether was supposed to be the medium through which electromagnetic waves and energy traveled, which was key to understanding the mechanisms behind teleportation and weather phenomena. The experiments at Montauk also expanded into research on stealth technology, which aimed to make objects, including ships and aircraft, invisible to radar. In this way, Montauk became a center not only for research on the manipulation of time and space, but also for advanced military technologies that could revolutionize warfare. Neumann, who spearheaded this research, sought to explain the phenomena of teleportation and weather manipulation, which could yield incredible military benefits. Although many of these experiments ended in unforeseen consequences, new ways of exploiting scientific discoveries were constantly sought. The continuing story of the mysteries of the USS Eldridge reveals deeper metaphysical layers that continue to intrigue both scientists and conspiracy theorists. After the ship returned to reality after its mysterious disappearance, Dr. John Norman noticed that not only had the radar monitoring systems lost track, but the ship itself seemed to be cut off from all reality. Serious psychological problems arose among the crew. Some suffered profound breakdowns, and in extreme cases, some were literally melted into the ship's structure, a sign of their mental and physical turmoil. The official diagnosis was a state of complete insanity, and Dr. Norman quickly realized that conventional medical methods would not suffice. The phenomenon began to be analyzed from a metaphysical perspective. As Norman noted, it was crucial to understand that the ship was locked in a so-called electromagnetic bottle, which meant that it was in a state separated from time and space. This phenomenon caused the crew to lose synchronization with their internal biological clock. The issue of the lack of time in this mini-cosmos began to be crucial. Norman explained that the human mind is constantly synchronized with time, which allows it to function in reality. Without this synchronizer, the mind begins to fall into chaos. People, deprived of the ability to relate to time, began to lose their sense of reality, which led to the development of mental states such as anxiety or paranoia. Dr. Norman's team also studied how this phenomenon affects human biology. They found that long-term exposure to changes in the electromagnetic field not only affects the psyche, but also at the molecular level. Crew members, being locked in this bottle, began to experience changes in their DNA, which had long-term health consequences. The phenomenon that was observed also had its roots in the work of German scientists during World War II, who in their own way used metaphysics and technology. Norman wondered whether their approach to studying extraterrestrial phenomena could provide answers to contemporary problems. Ultimately, Dr. Norman concluded that to understand the Eldridge phenomenon, science and metaphysics had to be combined. Only then could a complete picture of this complex situation, which not only concerned the crew but also the fundamental principles that govern our universe, be obtained. This research led to the concept of a new kind of science that could study both physics and metaphysics simultaneously. Although many people rejected this approach, Norman believed that the future of science lay in combining the two fields, and that his work could help us understand a reality that was much more complex than anyone had ever suspected. He decided to create a team to study and analyze the phenomena associated with Eldridge and other similar cases, hoping that their research would provide answers that would allow humanity to understand not only the nature of reality itself, but also our role in it. Between 1948 and 1967, research into paranormal phenomena and their relationship to space-time and weather became a subject of interest not only for enthusiasts, but also for serious scientific institutions. During this period, various research projects took place, including those related to the so-called military projects, which investigated the possibility of using paranormal phenomena in a military and intelligence context. One of the key projects was the MK-Ultra project, run by the CIA, which began in the 1950s. Its goal was to study the effects of chemicals on the human psyche and the possibility of manipulating behavior. As part of this project, research was also conducted on telepathy and other paranormal phenomena, including the effects of weather changes on the psyche. As research progressed, it was discovered that weather changes could have a significant impact on our well-being. Scientists such as Dr. David F. Mustard noted that differences in atmospheric pressure could cause headaches and other ailments. In the 1960s, research also began to examine the effects on mood, resulting in the term weather melancholy, which refers to a state of low mood due to atmospheric changes such as low pressure or lack of sunlight. Psychologists such as Dr. Norman H. Brown argued that atmospheric changes could affect our thought and emotional processes, leading to what is known as somatization. This phenomenon is where stress and emotions can manifest as headaches, fatigue, or even depression. In the 1960s, as UFO research projects gained momentum, numerous reports of sightings of unidentified flying objects were made. Scientists such as Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who was one of the principal investigators for Project Blue Book, analyzed these phenomena, noting possible connections between UFOs and meteorological phenomena. Hynek, previously a skeptic, began to notice that some of the sightings could be related to unusual weather conditions, which prompted him to investigate further. In 1969, after the completion of Project Blue Book, which aimed to evaluate and analyze UFO reports, the results of the research were presented to Congress. Scientists and paranormal experts such as Dr. Edward Condon published a report that stated that most UFO sightings could be explained as natural atmospheric phenomena, but there were still some cases that were difficult to explain. Condon and his team pointed out that some of the sightings could be related to meteorological phenomena, such as atmospheric balloons or unusual clouds. In 1969, after the completion of the research project, the United States Congress decided to close the base, which had huge consequences. The reason for the closure was the disturbing research results that the scientists revealed. It turned out that through electromagnetic waves, it was possible to influence the human psyche, which raised fears that such technology could be used to manipulate political decisions. Congressmen were concerned that the military generals could use this knowledge to subtly influence politicians, thus gaining a strategic advantage. As a result, Congress, concerned about ethics and the potential for abuse, voted to shut down the project. As a result, the base was closed and its funding was cut off. However, the military authorities were not about to give up. They were well aware that the possibilities of manipulating the weather and human psyche were too attractive to pass up. Although Congress formally closed the base, the Army decided to find a way to continue research in secret. The General Services Administration, GSA, was chosen to take over the project and gained custody. Research continued at the base, using new radio frequencies in the 425 to 450 megahertz range, which allowed for further experiments that could lead to discoveries in the fields of psychotronics and meteorology. The base also housed the Brookhaven Group, a laboratory engaged in electrical research and phenomena related to energy differences. This group convinced the military that the project should continue, pointing out the potential threat from other countries that could develop similar technologies. After the project was closed, the Army was able to find an alternative source of funding. An interesting aspect of this story is the legend of gold captured by the Americans during World War II. It is said that in 1934, a shipment of fascist gold was intercepted. This gold was supposed to be transported through France to ports and then transported by ship to the USA. During the transport, at some point, an explosion occurred, which destroyed the locomotive and killed the security guard consisting of 50 commandos. Some of the gold could have been taken over by another team, which meant that it was put under a new administration. There was speculation that it was from this gold that secret projects were financed, and the mysterious sources of funding for the base were completely unknown. Preston Nichols, a researcher and participant in these events, claimed that despite the lack of direct evidence, there were rumors about financing from captured gold. This was an unimaginable amount at that time, reaching $100 billion, which had a huge impact on the development of secret research programs. Through creativity and determination, the Army managed to hide the true source of funding and continue work on the project despite official prohibition. Congress, unaware of these actions, cut off funding, but was unable to stop the military from further research. In this way, after the project was closed in 1969, the military structures continued to work, and the mysterious research on the effects of electromagnetic waves on the psyche and weather could continue in the shadows, preparing the ground for future, more technologically advanced projects. Interestingly, General Pato, outraged by the incident, immediately ordered an investigation into the matter. How could this have happened? Unfortunately, his attempts were met with resistance at every level of government. He was ordered not to deal with the incident. This is a matter for the American government, he was told. It was a clear sign that forces were operating in the shadows, which we now call the shadow government. Taking control of the train, how did that happen? People appeared who, unknown to the public, probably used detonations or explosions. As a result, the gold was suddenly secured, and no trace of it was left. It is said that the gold was sent to the mysterious Montauk base. One wonders what really happened. Maybe it did not reach America at all, but was sent to Switzerland. Or maybe the Germans had a hand in it. The story of this train, which fell into the hands of the Allies, remains unclear. But that is not the end. The gold took on a new value. By the time it was finally secured, its value had increased significantly. It is estimated that the base could have had at its disposal an amount of around $200 billion. But there was another family in all this, the Krupp family. It was a German entrepreneur who produced armaments during World War II, and according to some sources, financed this mysterious project. Interestingly, at the Nuremberg trials, Krupp was convicted of using prisoners in his factories. However, the punishment was surprisingly mild, a few years suspended. After the war, he returned to the position of head of his company. Why? Because control of his company was taken over by an American corporation. We can only guess what the real reasons were for financing the Montauk Project. After all this, the project was codenamed Phoenix 2, which symbolically refers to being reborn from the ashes. Congress closed the financial case, but the project was secretly reborn. New sources of financing were found. In such cases, money seems to have no value. What matters is the result. And the goal was to prove that it is possible to manipulate people using electromagnetic waves. This was the goal of the experiment conducted at the base, which was now operating at full speed. The entire base staff consisted of trusted people, and a special reconnaissance battalion codenamed 0773 was introduced. Interestingly, in 1971, the base was operated by old radar equipment from the 1940s. You may wonder why the Army was using such outdated equipment. Well, the civilian population knew little about what was going on there. The base was open again, but not completely. Congress decided to close it in secrecy. Sometimes, some countries with weak armies do not have modern technology at all. Sometimes, however, old equipment turns out to be more valuable. What happened since 1971? The experiments went into full swing. It was discovered that the radar, which operated in the 400 megahertz band, affected the moods of the base staff. In order to test this theory, American war veterans from Vietnam were invited to spend some time there. Yes, the base had a beach, and the soldiers got free rest and good food. In the meantime, in secret, radars regulated their moods, and the soldiers became guinea pigs. Everything was collected and documented, attempts to manipulate groups of people. As you can see, secrecy and manipulation intertwine in an amazing way. Well, maybe that's not the end of the story. As I mentioned earlier, the experiments in Montauk opened the door to unknown possibilities of manipulating the human mind. As the research developed, various aspects of the impact of electromagnetic waves on the psyche and emotions began to be studied. Duncan Cameron was not the only subject of these studies. Other people who were exposed to the same waves participated in the project. These studies aimed to discover how different frequencies could affect people's behavior and their ability to cooperate in groups. Over time, it became clear that even small changes in frequency could lead to significant differences in the moods and behavior of the participants. It is worth noting that these were not just experiments to control soldiers' moods. Government agencies used these studies to gain an advantage in various fields, from military science to social psychology. This opened up new possibilities, but also dangers, as the lines of ethics began to blur. There was also controversy over the ethics of these experiments. The government, aware of the dangers of manipulating the human mind, attempted to cover up certain aspects of the program. Many participants were not fully aware of what they were getting into, which raised concerns about their rights and protections. After all, these were not just statistics. These were human lives. As technology has developed, the Montauk program has become increasingly advanced. New tools have emerged that have allowed for even more precise adjustment of the wave frequency to the needs of the research. As a result, scientists have begun to notice that these techniques can be used not only to control moods, but also to induce more complex reactions, such as anxiety or aggression. One of the most interesting phenomena observed was the so-called arousal phenomenon. It turned out that certain frequencies could induce a sense of euphoria, or on the contrary, deep sadness in the participants, which was an unprecedented phenomenon. This led to questions about how far one could go in manipulating emotions and whether such practices should be allowed at all. I mentioned earlier the so-called radar that was used in Montauk. Its use was not limited to influencing moods. At some point, its potential to generate visions also began to be studied, which meant that people exposed to the waves could experience various perceptual states that seemed to be on the border between reality and hallucination. This opened up a whole new field of research that could be used for both military and psychotherapy purposes. Over the years, conspiracy theories about the project have also emerged. Some have claimed that Montauk was not only experimenting on humans, but also on extraterrestrial technology, which has caught the attention of conspiracy theorists. There were rumors that the project was connected to research into teleportation and space-time. While many of these theories can be taken with a grain of salt, the fact that they were popular enough to attract media attention speaks volumes about the public's concerns about secret government programs. And that's all for today's episode of our series on the Montauk Project. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, we encourage you to subscribe to our podcast. That way, you won't miss any future episodes, which will be full of fascinating Montauk-related topics and other surprising discoveries. Share your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for being with us, and see you in the next installments of our Montauk Project series. May each new discovery inspire you to explore the mysteries of this world.